Yo, what's up? So, there was recently an OTS at my local card shop that I played in, and I wanted to kind of go over what some of my mistakes were, my deck list, and some things I think were cool. I played in a few OTSs before, maybe like 3 or 4, and this was my best performance. So it was 6 rounds, and I went X2 with Centurion, and my only losses were to Yubel, which I kind of expected. In retrospect, I definitely should have built my side deck more for Yubel because I think it's probably the deck's hardest matchup. But honestly, I thought my list was very solid. I did play some cards that aren't very standard for the Centurion deck, which did come up and they were very good, and I'll explain my choices for them later. But I'm pretty satisfied with my performance. I ended up placing 13th out of 48 players, but only one X2 made it to top 8 because 2 people split at one point, so they were at 13 points where they would have been at 12 because they also would have been X2, I believe. So then I believe that 3 X2s would have made it. I was at table 3 in my last round, so I just kind of got unlucky that, well, I'm not going to say that, but there was definitely like a small possibility I made it top 8, but it's all good. This was my best performance at OTS so far, and I think I'm definitely getting better at the game, which is kind of the important part. Let me talk about my deck list and the things that I would change and what I liked about it. I chose to play Centurion, obviously, and the deck that I've really been enjoying because it has a good line under Fubulos. It can be very good under Perulia, so like if you open Oath, and that's like your starter, and they Perulia as their only hand trap, it is full combo without giving them any draws, which is really cool. I mean, Oath is the only 1-card starter I believe that doesn't give you double Blazar, but I did not make double Blazar even once today, and I also think that that combo only really ever ends up happening if your opponent has nothing or you're playing against a breaker deck. Otherwise, like, it just kind of loses to Imperm on the Crimson Dragon. So I don't really like going for it because it's kind of risky, honestly. Anyway, so I decided to play 43 cards instead of 40 because there were a lot of different hand traps that I wanted to play in the main deck, and I felt like if I had cut some of them, it would have just made the deck worse, honestly. I also think there are enough 1-card combos in the deck that you don't really need to minimize it to 40. It also can mess up your siding patterns, so I think 43 was honestly pretty good. I don't think I would go any higher, maybe 45 at the most, but I don't really know what else I would play in the deck besides like a 3rd Droll and a 3rd Ogre, which I didn't think were really necessary. I think the only thing that's like pretty unstandard about my main deck is that I chose to play DD Crow and Talents. I mean, there are definitely people who are on Talents, but I don't think most people are playing Crow in the main. It's a card that pairs really well with other hand traps, I thought, and in simplified game states, which the deck is kind of trying to do, you want to hand trap your opponent to death, and if you can't kill him on the crackback, you use the fact that the deck is mid-range to keep playing the game at a stronger level. So once you establish the first Blazar, the game is pretty much over once it becomes simplified. But if you can't get to that, you're using your hand traps to continue to make sure that your opponent can't play the game. And Crow is a card that can interact with the spell cards in the Snake Eye deck, so like they want to go like original to do the putback effect to get another level 1. You can just banish to get rid of it, which is really good in the later games. There were quite a few times my opponent like summons the Yubel Star, does like a bunch of other stuff, but they get hand trapped to the point where like they only have the Yubel Star on the field, right? So when you go to crash over it or get rid of it on your turn and they activate the effect, they no longer have a monster, so you can't really Bestial it, but you can Crow it, so they can't get the follow-up that way. It's also a card that deals with the Hollowed Azamina, so people were playing Retaliating Sea, and that was the card I tested a little bit, and it never actually won me any games. It's a card that is hard to deal with for players that are more inexperienced, but the people who have practiced against it know how to out it. So I didn't think it was that great, honestly, and I just preferred to play a card that can interact with a lot of different things, which was Crow. It also came up with banishing their Garunix, their Princess, their Flamebridge, and it's like pretty decent into rogue matchups too. Like, I thought it was really great. Every time I had it, it helped me. That being said, it is not always the most impactful hand trap. So if it's the only card in my hand, it's most of the time not going to end my opponent's turn, which is probably an argument to play it at 2, which I think would be fair. But every time I drew the card, it was honestly amazing for me, and I'm going to continue to play it until Raziel comes out, where it's not as good. The other card I wanted to talk about was Talents. I think that this deck can really struggle to go second with most hands, especially if you don't open 3 hand traps. I mean, sometimes 2 hand traps does it, but typically what you're trying to do is have enough non-engine to just end your opponent's turn, and then you just kill them on the crackback, or dwindle their resources so much that they can't come back, because your deck's recursion is a lot better than theirs. However, I wanted a main deck answer to breaking a board, and I almost wish I played 3 talents because the card was like insane for me. Every time I drew it, I won the game. It's a card that, like, it's a board breaker that when you have other ways to play in your hand, you can sequence your plays to make the talents so effective that they just can't come back from it. It came up a couple times that, like, I want talents to take like Grunix or something like that after they already activated a few effects, which left them with no fires on the field. And then it just happens to be a level 8, so then I synchroed it away for like Auxiliary or Legatia to like draw a card or search follow-up or search Bonds, because Bonds helps you let you play through hand traps. It's not a card that like inherently you really want to see in your opening hand, but if you can get to it, I mean, sometimes opening is not even bad, but if you've already played the game a little bit and then talents, and then you go Bonds to place, you can definitely just kill them on the crackback pretty easily. Bonds was also one of the only like one of cards, like engine cards, that you have to play that I wasn't siding out going second, because even though like it hypothetically sucks to draw because it doesn't do anything on its own, it doesn't stop your opponent from playing, I felt like it helps you push through a board if you do see it, as long as you already played a little bit. So it's kind of like a 1.5 card kind of a deal, a little bit risky to play, but I'm pretty satisfied with keeping it in. I also was thinking about keeping in Phalanx because it had come up a couple times where like I needed it after siding it out, but I think dead drawing both of them is just bad. And so if I had to pick one, I was going to pick Bonds, honestly. But I think everything else in the main deck was pretty standard. I obviously chose to play the Bestials over the cash package. I think the cash cards are really good, but I think the Bestials are just like, can carry games on their own sometimes, like if you have hand traps to back them up. And so I want to talk about my side deck. So I think most of the choices I made for the side deck were actually very good, and almost every single card came up and was really strong. The only things that I really did not like in my side deck were actually Called By and Harpies. My main reason for playing Harpies and not the third Cyclone was that it was just an OTS, and I kind of figured that like a lot of people who were playing in the event would just be playing some random jank maybe, or maybe I would randomly run into Lab or Rescue. I don't even think Rescue is like a bad deck. With the Asmana cards it's pretty strong, so like Set 4. If I'm able to just go Harpies, like that's pretty great. And I thought Call By, which I only drew one time, and it really didn't help me. I think the deck naturally can play through hand traps pretty well as long as you draw like a good variety of cards. So like obviously opening multiple normal summons isn't great, but if you open like Terraforming, Chimera Oath, like that's just insane, especially if you have talents to back it up. I don't think there's anything more you can ask for, so Called By isn't really that great. Your deck also doesn't naturally lose to like Ash Blossom or Droll. Those cards definitely can affect you, but it's not that great. And then in terms of like Called By on the Charmies, I specifically played this deck because the deck doesn't really lose those cards too hard. So I think Called By could have definitely been something else, and I just didn't end up needing Harpies, but I hypothetically could have needed it. I think the pretty standard card that I played was Deck Lockdown, and then I played 3 Perulia. I kind of chose not to play Fuelos, and it's something I've been seeing going around on YouTube, and just even some of my friends have talked about it. Fuelos incentivizes your opponent to pass, which hypothetically speaking is really good, right? So you get to just play for free, but I don't think that the board that I make is so ignorant that I'm just auto winning the game. What I was really trying to do was have a card in my deck that gave me a lot of resources to break their board with on the crackback, and because I played Super Poly, just giving me draws, because the way the deck wins is with card advantage most of the time. So you're trying to lower their resources as much as you can until they just can't play the game anymore, because once you're in a simplified game state and you have Blazer plus any amount of hand traps, like you just win the game pretty much. They just can't do anything about it. So I wanted a card that didn't incentivize my opponent to pass. I wanted them to play into it, and That's why I chose Perulia over Fugalos. That kind of leads me to the other cards in my side deck. So I sided 2 Nib and 3 Super Poly. So once again, like, the deck can really struggle to go second and break boards on its own. So my focus was to play cards that help me against the fire deck. And I think my main oversight was not putting in a going second option for Yubel, because Super Poly can be good, but the problem was when I did play against Yubel, and I saw the Super Poly, they had a field that was not super polyable, which was really annoying because the Phantom can't be used for fusion materials, and I don't really have space for Loving Defender, nor did I really want to play that card. But Super Poly is crazy against the Fire King deck. It's also pretty good against random rogue decks. It's very good against this deck, so it helps you in the mirror. And I thought Nibiru was really good because after you've already hand trapped your opponent and you draw into it with Perulia, which is why I only played 2 and not 3 because I didn't really want to start with it and it'd be my only hand trap, nor did I want to draw multiples of it. After you've hand trapped them once or twice and they keep pushing and pushing to try to establish some sort of a board, you just hit them with a nib at the end and then they pass on nothing. Meanwhile, you're like collecting card advantage from the Perulia, which I thought was really strong. It also leaves them with a light, which means if you drew into Super Poly, you can hypothetically use the token to make, I forget if it's Guru or Mud Dragon that's same attribute. I think it's Mud Dragon that's same attribute, different type. And then it's just a free level 4 extender. It also helps protect you from like Imperm Veiler, because you just go my Dragon Call Light or Dark, depending on what your normal summon is. Super Poly I thought was also kind of crazy because what I would do, obviously I'm playing it going second, so what you can do is like Super Poly and it's not interactable, which is really good against the Fiendlink, the Yubel deck or the Fiendlink deck, because they can't Desiree it, and then you have a way to get rid of the Desiree. Even if they go like shuffle back sequence and the thing you summon, like that's whatever. The main point is you're just dealing with that point of interruption that is like very difficult to deal with. But if you are able to keep the bodies on your field, Mud Dragon is a free level 4 extender, so you can go into Primera. And then Garua is really great because if you have Primera plus Garua, you get to make Chaos Angel with a light and a dark, and then you can chain block the draw if you really wanted to. There was also a situation where like I had Super Poly going second, and I was able to stop my opponent with hand traps, so when it passed back to me, it really didn't feel worth it to Super Poly because I was like, I can just break through this. I ended up establishing like Auxilla and Blazar on my opponent's turn. Before I got to the Blazar, my opponent was kind of playing in a way where the Super Poly felt pretty good to use, so what I did was I didn't even get into Blazar because it actually felt like a little bit worse because I could just do it back on my turn. So what I did was I Super Poly'd into Mud Dragon using their monster, so it already removed 2 bodies, and then I summoned Primera from my spell and trap zone. I went field spell 1, Primera 2, just to play around Impulse, just in case. I synced into the Primera Synchro. I searched Oath, and I popped whatever. I can't remember if I popped itself or if it popped another guy. And then I just blanked their other monster. I had Oath on the comeback, so then they just passed in my end phase. I put a guy in the spell and trap zone. And Oath is full combo on its own, so they just couldn't come back from that, and I just won the game, pretty much. The only other thing I have to say about my extra deck is that I decided to play Artemis and Almirage, and both of them did come up, actually. So when you get like hand trapped to death, you can just like use your normal summon, whether it's Trudeo, which is a pyro that's 1000 attack, I believe. When you normal summon that, you can make Almirage, and when you normal summon Primera, it's a spellcaster, you can make Artemis, and then just use the Bestial. As long as you draw them, obviously. You can use the Bestial to, turn it into SP, ban or something. And at least you have SP pass plus hand traps, and you possibly even have regained if you start with the Bestial stuff as well. So that's like really not even bad. There was actually a game where I went SP, regained pass, and then on my opponent's turn, I hand trapped them. The last thing they interacted me with, I SP'd, and then, or maybe I did in the other order, I can't quite remember. But I actually used the regain to put my own SP back, because on the following turn, my hand was like crazy on the comeback after I top decked Oath. So then what I did was like, I pushed through the rest of their interruptions with their like hand traps and stuff. And I made like I got to 1 level 12, which is pretty much all you need. And then I was able to use the Bestials to make like another SP, which I didn't go for full effect. I just linked 2 off for a regular SP, and I got it back. that way. Plus, like, I got a free draw. In the context of the duel, I think it made like a little bit of sense. Oh, it was because it was against Yubel, and I banished their spirit. And I didn't want to give them their spirit back, because once it's banished, it's pretty much gone for the most part. So I'd rather just like shuffle back my own SP at that point. I also like didn't even have to do it, but I didn't have another opportunity to like shuffle back or put to the bottom and draw a card for regained. And I was really just trying to like out-resource them, so I was trying to gain more advantage. It just felt right in the duel, and it ended up winning me that game, but I didn't win the match, unfortunately. The other thing that's pretty standard in the Centurion builds is that they play the Premier Synchro, and it just never comes up for me. I was even talking to my friend about it, who also plays Centurion, and they said it just never comes up, so I really never missed it. And even if I didn't play the Super Volley stuff, I probably wouldn't play a second one. I just play like, I don't even know, maybe even Chen Yang, just because I play Crow and like there's SP and the Bestials. I don't think it would be like the worst option. But that's all I really have to say about the deck. I thought it performed really well. I definitely think I could have probably beat my first Yubel opponent, but it was honestly round 1 and I was nervous, so I think I misplayed a little bit. But the second Yubel I faced was actually my last round, and that one felt a little bit more out of my hands. So the first game we had was like pretty interactive, and I didn't have enough interruptions to push through their hand, unfortunately. And so they ended up just like going through all my interruptions, and then they went like throne, and that's pretty much the end of the game right there. Because they just get rid of my stuff, and the deck is just so powerful. They put up such an ignorant board that it just didn't feel worth it. I would have rather imagined myself being able to go into like another 2 games, because I lost the first game in the match, and their combo takes so long. I didn't really want to play into time, especially with Centurion, which is like a relatively quick deck to play. So I just scooped that match, hoping that like my hand would be better in the second game. And the second game was rough because I drew Primera and 4 of the 1-of, so I think I drew like Gargoyle, Phalanx, Wake Up, and Bonds. And so if Primera didn't resolve, like I pretty much lost on the spot there for the most part. So I went normal Primera, they ashed, and I was like, that's great. Set Phalanx pass, they go normal Lotus, I go Phalanx to banish, and I was like, this is gonna have to be enough. And they went throne, and I was like, well, that's just the end of the game pretty much. So that one felt a little bit more out of my hands, unfortunately, but it's all good. I still think that I play better at this OTS than I have at like any event, and I think that the practice will help me in the next event that I play, and I'll be able to do better then. So that was my OT experience this past weekend. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. See ya.